I see you dancing, I'm like, hola, 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 hola. With your move fancy, make me wanna hola, 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 hola. I got your attention, spending that moolah, 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 moolah. I'm a drop poppin', pocket, swola, 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 swola.
You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Haristadoulou.
All right, everybody. Good afternoon. It is Monday, March 29th, 2021. Welcome back to another episode of the Greeks Gridiron. I am your host, Ethan Haristadoulou. All the news to talk about with you guys today. Very big weekend just happened for the NFL. A massive trade that has so many implications for what's going on in the early few picks of the draft. We're going to go into some really deep, I guess, like a deep dive into kind of what these implications mean, kind of look into what are the teams maybe trying to do and accomplish with these trades, where they might go. So we're just going to jump right into the thick of things. First things first, as we always start here on the Greeks Gridiron, I'm going to hit you guys with the question of the day. It does go along with the basically headline news of this Monday afternoon. So first things first, with Trevor Lawrence obviously going number one, there's now a really big question mark as to what's going on with numbers 2 and 3, with the 49ers moving up, basically maneuvering this massive trade. The Dolphins just kind of wheeling and dealing picks this past weekend. Who do you think the Jets are going to take now, and who do you think the 49ers are looking to take? Now, here's the deal. The Jets are in the conversation because Zach Wilson just had his pro day a few days ago, and he looked really, really good. He had a massive throw earlier that, everyone was talking about. That was just... It was really good. It's something you don't see too often from a quarterback. It was about 60 yards, throwing off platform, going one way, throwing the other. And not only that, it was such an accurate throw. He still led the receiver. It just looked really, really good overall. So I want to bring attention to this throw. I actually have the video here if you have not seen it. For those of you that are listening, maybe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever it may be that you're listening on. This is a visual show, so if you're not aware, you can catch this live on YouTube as I am recording this right now. So real quick, I'll turn you guys' attention to this massive throw. Again, if you guys have not seen it, it's outstanding. I mean, it looks as good as advertised. We'll go ahead and just throw a quick video up here for you guys to see. I'll play this for you all. Hit that play button here. Of course, the video is going to buffer now. Go ahead and reload this video real quick.
In the top 5, he couldn't beat.
There we go. Pull this back up. Boom. Look at this throw. I mean, just absolutely unbelievable. Throwing off platform, downfield. And the big highlight for me was just the ability to throw it and put it in such a good spot to the receiver. It's over the shoulder, leading the receiver. He doesn't have to slow down for the throw. He's catching it in stride as he goes downfield. I mean, just an overall phenomenal pass. Great placement off the back foot. Again, throwing one way as he's traveling the other. A lot of people are making a big deal about this throw. I've been seeing videos, I've seen this quarterback do it and this quarterback do it. And, I saw a bunch of videos of, I know Mitch Trubisky hit a throw, Sam Darnold doing the same thing, Dak Prescott hit one pretty similar. That's all fine and dandy. Don't get me wrong. We're highlighting the pro day of Zach Wilson. It's funny how the internet reacts to things like this when they come out, because everyone's like, oh, it's just them throwing in shorts. There's no contest. It's, there's no pressure. I mean, there is pressure. You have coaches from every single team and then some that are interested in picking you up and bringing you into the NFL. Granted, are you under contested pressure of other players? No, of course not. But there's still pressure there in delivering that ball and throwing it, placement and everything. And I mean, it looked so good. And if that's a skill set he's bringing to the table, nobody's saying that all these other quarterbacks can't make the throw. What we're saying is that Zach Wilson is able to make the throw. That's why it's a big deal. He is the prospect coming out of college after all. So everyone has the right that's interested in Zach Wilson to be excited about it because it's a phenomenal throw. That's an NFL caliber throw, not something that too many quarterbacks can make. Again, no discredit to any of the other quarterbacks in the league. I'm sure that there are plenty who are able to make that throw. I didn't see a video about Matthew Stafford. I'm sure he can hit that throw. He has a cannon of an arm. Patrick Mahomes, of course, can probably hit a throw similar to that. Who else? Josh Allen might be another one. There's plenty of quarterbacks who can, attempt the throw and probably hit the mark. It's just a matter of this is the college kid coming out and is able to make the throw. That's the whole purpose and why it's such a big deal. Now, as far as how this whole trade shaked out, we'll kind of break it down for you guys. And I mean, this is probably something you've heard all weekend long, but I'm just going to rehash for anyone who may not have already heard. The 49ers have dealt for the 3rd overall pick in the draft. They gave the Dolphins the number 12 pick, a 1st and 3rd rounder in next year's draft, and then a 1st rounder in 2023. On top of that, once the Dolphins got that pick, they went and got the number 6 pick in this year's draft as well, dealing that same number 12 pick, the 123rd pick in this draft, and a 1st rounder in 2022 to the Philadelphia Eagles in exchange for that 6th pick. And they also got the 156th pick. I believe it's like a 5th rounder or something like that. So the Dolphins made a lot of moves. They're like the headlines of this weekend. They ultimately move from 3 to 6 after all those trades are done and done. The Eagles pulling in a bunch of draft capital for a team that has so many holes that need to be filled. So let's kind of break this all down and really get into the nitty-gritty of this all and kind of make sense of why these moves were made and, kind of where these teams might be heading and what they're kind of looking to do with all these moves. So we're going to start with kind of talking about Zach Wilson and the Jets here. I know they weren't involved in any of the trades, but, they're kind of a determining factor in how the other pieces fall through for the remainder of the team. So with Zach Wilson's very strong pro day just happening this past weekend, or this, what was it? I don't remember. I think it was on Friday was when it happened, or maybe it was Saturday. I don't remember the day exactly. But with his strong showing in the pro day, the belief is now that the Jets are more than likely targeting him. Now, this causes a lot of questions because of Sam Darnold. So, first thing, Kimberly Martin of ESPN talked with 3 different GMs. She tweeted this out earlier. It was on NFL, I believe it's like Get Up side or something like that. She talked with 3 different GMs. She reported that Darnold is kind of a tough sell to all the GMs that are interested, just because, not everyone's 100% certain that he is better than what has been advertised. It's kind of like a mixed bag of, he might not be good or, and maybe it is the product of the system that he's in. He is being coached by Adam Gase, literally one of the worst head coaches in NFL history, if you'd ask just about anybody. So there's so much conversation on kind of, what is the issue there? I guess a tough sell with Sam Darnold right now is that he does have a 5th-year option available. He was a first-round pick, the number 3 pick in the draft he came out of. The option is roughly about $20 million in cap space. So any team that's bringing him on, they may not even be keeping him on that same exact contract with a 5th-year option. The GMs were telling her that more than likely whoever trades for him isn't going to pick up that 5th-year option because it's a lot of money to just commit to outright without having Sam Darnold kind of prove himself in their system, whoever it is that decides to pick him up. The GMs were also saying that more than likely nobody right now at this current moment is willing to give up anything around like a 3rd round, and some even said like a compensatory 4th round pick. So his, the capital that he would bring in is not as high as what some people initially were saying. A lot of people were saying, that teams would probably give up like a 1st or a 2nd round pick. But I think what's happening is with these pro days going on, Zach Wilson showing up for his, Mac Jones was just a few, what was this like, oh my gosh, I think it was like the 24th. Alabama had their pro day, the 25th, one of those two. They had their first pro day. Mac Jones looked really good. He was showing off, his athleticism, a lot of questions around whether he was actually, there's a difference between a mobile quarterback and an athletic quarterback, one who can just kind of move around in the pocket and extend plays, and then one that's like an actual threat to be scrambling on you every single throw. He was really just working on showing his athleticism in the pro day, and a lot of people liked what he was showing. Teams like the San Francisco 49ers, they're potentially looking to upgrade that position, and they're looking for someone who's more of a pocket passer, but also able to move around in the pocket if necessary. So it sounds like Mac Jones, Zach Wilson kind of elevating their draft stock, and what it's doing is kind of tanking any sort of value that Sam Darnold has. Because, a month ago, we were hearing, okay, 1st rounders, maybe high 2nd rounders, things like that were something that teams would be willing to offer or the Jets would be looking for in return. Now GMs are saying, we might not even be willing to give up a 3rd round pick for him because of how good these quarterbacks are making themselves look in their pro days. So, I mean, it's a very weird situation. On top of that, Jeremy Fowler of ESPN also reported, I got a lot of different things here that I was looking at when I was getting into this. He reports that he's been told there's a possibility of the Jets drafting a quarterback, someone like Zach Wilson, who's like the heavy favorite, it seems at this point, and then keeping Sam Darnold on the team. Now, that is a mess, if you ask me. I'm not 100%... I'm on the fence about Joe Douglas. Granted, he hasn't had much time to really prove himself as a GM there in New York, but there's been so many weird things that I'm just not a fan of. The idea of them being in on the Watson sweepstakes, the Jets just have so much that they need to fix that I'd never really thought that Watson was kind of a fit for New York because you have so many issues that Watson's not going to solve the problem of your team. I mean, he was on a terrible team in Houston, and I think they went 5-11. So he's not the answer on your team that was worse than Houston record-wise. You guys go, 2-14 or 3-13? I don't remember exactly, but I mean, you're literally picking number 2 for a reason here. A quarterback's not going to solve your answers. They're going to help a piece, sure, but you have so many picks and you have the ability to draft so many potentially really good players, day one starters in those first and second round picks you have. Don't worry about the whole Watson sweepstakes and whatever that's all about. Focus on building a team. Draft a quarterback if you're really that interested in upgrading the quarterback position with one of the guys coming out right now. And then fill out the roster. You need wide receivers. You need defensive linemen, corners and safety. The whole defensive backfield is really a who's who outside of Marcus May. So, I mean, there's so many positions of need. Trading all that capital to get Watson, that never made sense to me. And when rumors like that come out, whether they're completely accurate or not, there's always some sort of truth to those rumors because they come from somewhere and they're not just being, and poor reporters may be making things up for stories, but, credible reporters are getting their information from somewhere and it's not just stuff they're pulling out of thin air and making up to talk about things. They've got to be coming from somewhere if they want to keep the credibility to their name. So I'm not sold on Joe Douglas. I feel the conversation with all that was really confusing to me. And the fact that they're weighing the option of keeping Darnold and drafting a quarterback, if it gets to the point where you're really sold on bringing in somebody like Zach Wilson, just get rid of Sam Darnold. Take what you can get. Take the 3rd round pick, and just leave it behind you. Let it be somebody else's issue. I don't understand the thought process behind that. Unless you really think that keeping Darnold for another year to see if he ends up working out, which, I mean, that doesn't seem likely, but who knows? Obviously we have Robert Saleh there now. They're reestablishing a whole new culture and system. I feel that Sam Darnold's time, if they're not going to commit to him and not draft a quarterback with that 2nd pick, just move on from him. Take whatever you can get. Does it suck that you kind of gave up a lot to get him and you're not going to get as much in return? No, but at least you're still getting a 3rd round pick. If you hit on that, that can be a solid player. So, I mean, I'm kind of confused at all this information that's coming out. In my opinion, if you were to, if I was to settle this whole situation out, Jets take the best offer for Darnold. They move on from him. They take whatever, pick it is that whether they want to wait up until the draft, and maybe that'll help give them a little bit more value because teams are starting to get antsy as they get closer to the draft of maybe trying to pull in someone like Sam Darnold. Maybe wait till then, but move on from Darnold and then take Zach Wilson or whatever quarterback it is you're enamored with in that 2nd pick. It doesn't make sense to me if you're not 100% sold on Sam Darnold being your guy going forward to keep him beyond, April 28th, the day before the draft, or maybe on draft day if, you're able to make a move. It just does not make sense to me to keep Darnold and have a rookie there. That just causes controversy. The media in New York is going to be all over that, eating it alive. It does not make sense to me to keep someone like Wilson and Darnold in there at the same time. And the reason I keep using Wilson's name is because it really seems like they're kind of sold on him and they've been enamored by him, especially after his pro day. So that's my thoughts on the whole Jets situation with the number 2 pick. Now, obviously not a piece of the entire trade that just went on, but if we're working in the idea that Sam Darnold is leaving, the Jets take Zach Wilson, this is kind of how things shake out for the rest of the teams. Now, the 49ers are suspected to be targeting a quarterback after making this move. Everyone's been saying you don't move up to number 3 and give up the picks you did just to draft, if it's a wide receiver or, whatever else. The San Francisco 49ers roster is already pretty deep and pretty solid. They don't need a bunch of pieces. People would argue they were a quarterback away last year from kind of really having a solid team together and being able to compete. They were also rattled with injuries. So, I mean, they could use a little more depth at certain positions, but on top of that, they need a quarterback because Jimmy G may or may not be the answer, and it sounds like San Francisco doesn't really want to find out anymore. So it sounds like they're targeting a quarterback. They're coming out and saying Jimmy G is our guy next year, but that's an air quotes thing. That's not something I buy completely. I would say that they're saying that just to kind of drive up his trade value. Whether they deal him before the draft, during the draft, maybe not even until the Week 8 trade deadline of this upcoming season. Whatever they decide to do with all that, I mean, I firmly believe that at some point between now and Week 8 of next season, Jimmy Garoppolo is going to get moved. Whether it's Jimmy G's playing bad, or if worst case scenario, he ends up on the IR and then whoever they take, if it's, if the Jets end up going with Zach Wilson and obviously Jaguars are taking Trevor Lawrence, if they take Justin Fields, or the hot rumor right now is maybe someone like Mac Jones, whoever they take at number 3 at quarterback ends up having to go in. I don't really believe in the whole Jimmy G being there. This is kind of like, Alex Smith being in front of Patrick Mahomes and then Patrick Mahomes kind of taking over, or just like the passing of the torch from any older quarterback to a young rookie or, a first year, second year guy that's been sitting in the backfield waiting, Aaron Rodgers behind, Brett Favre type deal, however you want to compare that. There's a lot of interest in where Jimmy G would end up going. If they were to move him, the mill is hard on the Patriots, but apparently people are saying that the Patriots organization has not really made a move since this whole trade has happened to pursue Jimmy G at all. Whether that's just both sides trying to play hardball right now, the Patriots situation at quarterback is kind of up in the air. Cam Newton is the starter, quote unquote, at this point. Whether that shakes out to be true or not will remain to be seen as we fall through the draft and everything. The way Cam's contract is structured, he's not structured per se to be the starter. If he doesn't start and he's on the roster, he's going to make like $7 million. That's below market value for a backup quarterback. Somebody like Chase Daniel, I believe he's making close to $10 million and he's going to be a backup for the Lions. So, I mean, at best, Patriots got a different quarterback that they are, more happy with, believe that it will be, a legitimate piece to their team. They've spent so much money in free agency. It could be a good suit for them, whether that's Jimmy G or somebody else. But the big rumor is Jimmy G going there, and it just seems like both sides are playing hardball. I'm kind of in the position where I would not be surprised if the Patriots don't even go after Jimmy G. The 49ers, he has like $25 million in cap space that they're paying him, or like he's keeping in the 49ers organization. So if he gets moved, they only take like a $2 million cap hit. They're not really pressured to move him at this point. The other teams that I could see him maybe going to, Chicago's another one. I mean, they need a quarterback. I think Jimmy G is an upgrade from Andy Dalton, albeit I will say I think Andy Dalton is a solid quarterback for the Chicago Bears. Whether he produces there or not remains to be seen, but I mean, and I don't think Andy Dalton's as bad as some people seem to think he is. He did take the Bengals of all teams to 5 straight playoffs when he was over there in Cincinnati. Granted, he's been kind of a journeyman the last 2 years, but, whether they actually believe he's their QB1 or not, like they tweeted, is kind of just like, I mean, I don't really buy that. If there's a good opportunity of them to get somebody better, I really think the Bears are going to go after it, and Jimmy G would be a good fit over in Chicago. But it's interesting to see how this is all shaking out. And then the rumors of, the 49ers being interested in Mac Jones is something I'm very fascinated with, because this was something where everyone kind of thought it was like Trevor Lawrence and then flip or flop Zach Wilson or Justin Fields. And now everyone's saying that, maybe the 49ers are actually interested in somebody like Mac Jones. Currently, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are planning on going to Mac Jones Pro Day tomorrow, which is also going on at the same time as Justin Fields in Ohio State. That's kind of interesting. They're sending just assistants to go watch Justin Fields. Whether that means that they're sold on, the abilities of Justin Fields and they just want to get a closer look on Mac Jones, or if they think that this is like maybe Mac Jones is the guy and they really just want to get a better look at him and see, the athleticism that he has in person. I'm very curious to see how this all shakes out. Fabricio, welcome to the stream, man. I appreciate you for joining in. We're just discussing right now currently 49ers and what they may be doing with that number 3 pick. Outside of the quarterback realm, though, I'm kind of with everyone else on this. I don't really think that the 49ers should be going anywhere outside of quarterback. I mean, you don't trade up to number 3 to not take a quarterback. I mean, what would they realistic be looking for? I mean, maybe a wide receiver if they really like Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith. That might be somebody. I don't know. That's just a weird question that I have, is what else would you trade for if you're not going for a quarterback? So, I mean, all signs are pointing to QB for the 49ers at number 3, but who really knows? Outside of the 49ers, as far as the Eagles are concerned, I would say that they're, pretty big winners in this whole trade. The Eagles have so much draft capital now. They're looking at 11 picks in these next 2 drafts. They have 3 first-rounders next year and so many holes to fill that this is perfect for them. So let's look at it this way. The Eagles, let's go over some of the needs and potential players that they can pick at the now number 12 spot they're going to be picking at. So it sounds like we're going to move on the idea or the assumption that the Eagles are going with Jalen Hurts as QB1. That's kind of how this is all shaking out to be. It sounds like everyone's kind of buying in on the whole Jalen Hurts QB1 thing in Philadelphia. They need linebackers. They need offensive linemen. They need wide receivers, defensive backs. I mean, there's a whole list of positions you could really go after, but those are the 4 kind of positions of need that I've picked out myself. So with the linebackers, you have players like Micah Parsons, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. On top of that, Azeez Ojulari. There's so many really good linebackers in the earlier part of the first round that you could go after. I don't know per se if Micah Parsons will be available. I mean, he's projected to be really, really early, maybe inside the top 10. They're picking at 12, so he might not even be there. But somebody like Owusu-Koramoah or somebody like Ojulari, that's more realistic. They're projected to be like in the high, like the 15 to 10 range, somewhere around there. I believe Ojulari might be somewhere behind that 15 slot. If they do decide to go linebacker, 2 solid picks there. Offensive linemen, they have a really good shot at picking up somebody like Rashawn Slater or Christian Darrisaw, 2 really, really good tackles. They really need to work on the offensive line there. That's something that's very realistic for them. I wouldn't say Penei Sewell. I have him going to the Bengals. I just think that the Bengals, after seeing what happened to Joe Burrow last season, they need to start going after offensive line. They already kind of touched on it in free agency, but now take somebody like Sewell, who looks like an NFL pro already as a tackle, and just, shore up that left side and let it be done. That's the guy that protects Joe Burrow for hopefully the next 10 years if they go after him. So someone like Rashawn Slater, Christian Darrisaw, more realistic options for the Philadelphia Eagles. At wide receiver, I'm assuming Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith are probably going to be gone when they're picking at 12. So somebody like Alabama's Jalen Waddle, Rondale Moore, Amari Rodgers from Clemson, those are probably 3 people they could really go after. Amari Rodgers is projected to go later, but I like Amari Rodgers. I think he's a really solid wide receiver. He's projected more so closer to like 3rd round, but if that's someone they go after later in the draft, I would like that for Philly. But I mean, as far as like 1st round picks go, Jalen Waddle's more than likely going to be available. I think, like I said, Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith probably going to go before Waddle unless people are really worried about Devontae Smith's size at 170. So it'll just be interesting to see how that shakes out. Whether there's concerns about that or not will kind of determine who ends up being available at Philly for the wide receivers at number 12. And then as far as defensive backfield goes, I mean, no, because Jalen Mills is on the Patriots. I can't really even name a defensive back that's on the Eagles. No, I can't think of anybody that comes to name, and maybe that's on me, but I mean, you got a lot of people. Caleb Farley, Patrick Surtain, Tyson Campbell, Asante Samuel Jr.'s kind of rising his stock as we get close to the draft. I'm excited to see how that all works out. I think that, realistically, there's so many players available at that number 12 spot that they could go for. I think best player available is probably the route that they're going to end up going on their draft board. But those are just some of the options that you could potentially see the Eagles go after. I guess the whole reason that they were traded back, this is per Albert Breer from SI. He reported that Eagles GM Howie Roseman was convinced that the Bengals may be drafting wide receiver Jamar Chase. I guess the Eagles were really enamored by Jamar Chase, and it sounds like he believes that the Bengals are going to be taking him, and that was kind of the whole reason they decided to trade out of the number 6 spot. That surprises me because like I mentioned already, I have the Bengals taking Sewell. And if they don't take Sewell, I think that's a huge mistake. Do you need wide receivers? Yes, but you could potentially get somebody later in the draft. I mean, you have to protect Joe Burrow. Why would the Eagles? I'm very curious what the Eagles heard that made them believe that they're going to go after Jamar Chase. I understand how good Jamar Chase was back in 2019, but I mean, he did take a year off, and that's something you have to consider. Sewell, though, he's just a premier tackle. He's somebody that you could see playing in the NFL for the next 10 years. Protect your quarterback, who you hope to also have for at least 10 years. It just wouldn't make sense. So I'm curious where they got that information from, what really scared Howie Roseman into believing that. Whether it's that or they just wanted to accumulate draft stock. I feel like it's more the draft stock accumulation, but I mean, I would be shocked to see the Bengals not draft offensive linemen. And even if it's not Sewell, if it's Darrisaw or Slater, whoever they like more, Bengals got to be going offensive line here in the first round. They've got to be going first round offensive linemen. And then for the Dolphins, a lot of people have been saying, they kind of finessed everybody in the league, moving these picks around the way they have. It sounds like they're going to be going wide receiver, whether it's Chase, Smith, or Waddle. I mean, it's just kind of a who's who and who they like the most. I have a feeling it's probably going, I don't know, honestly. I have a feeling it's going to be Chase, just because when I look at the top 5, I feel like they're going to be the ones to pick the first wide receiver in the draft. So they're going to have a choice of whoever they want. And Jamar Chase does have the most hype around him. And they really need to bring in a playmaker to play alongside Devontae Parker. So Chase seems like a good fit. If they're not worried about Smith, Heisman winner, they could bring him in as well. Waddle is also a very solid wide receiver, but he was hurt more last year than, or he was hurt as opposed to somebody like Smith who didn't really have any issues going on. But whatever it is, I have a feeling Dolphins are probably going wide receiver. They need to give Tua another weapon to throw to, somebody that's going to make him comfortable with throwing downfield. That's been the conversation for him is Tua able to throw downfield? Is he not able to throw downfield? I'm curious to see where they end up going at wide receiver, but I have a very strong feeling it's going to be wide receiver for the pick. It could be any of those 3 playmakers, but I'm going to lock in on them going at wide receiver for their first pick in the draft. And that's kind of where I see all the teams as far as this whole big trade goes down, what they could be looking at potentially, what it means for the teams. You could realistically break this down in a number of different ways. That was just kind of how I sorted everything out based off all the stories I read and kind of where I think everything is going to go. As far as other news that came out from this past weekend, we do have some free agency news that we can discuss with you guys. As far as signings go, the Seahawks were bringing back Carlos Dunlap on a 2-year, $16.6 million deal. I was saying just last week, I was pretty surprised he hadn't been brought back either to Seattle or just brought in somewhere else. He signs on a cheaper deal than what he would have been given initially had the Seahawks not let him test the free agent market. So that whole thing kind of sorts out and works in favor of Seattle. The Ravens, working on their wide receiver position, they go after Sammy Watkins. They got him on a 1-year, $6 million deal. Whether this ends up being the piece they need to really help Lamar Jackson spread out his offense more, people have been saying that the argument is their offense is a little too one-dimensional. It's hope that, either Hollywood gets deep and, rips them open over the top or of a defense over the top, or they're just throwing it in the middle to Andrews at tight end. It's interesting to see that they're going after Watkins. I guess he's kind of the best wide receiver available. He gives them a little bit more size at the wide receiver position. He has been hurt a lot, and he hasn't been the most consistent wide receiver the last few years. So whether this works out for the Ravens, I don't really know. I like the signing because of what they need at the position. I just don't necessarily know if Watkins is the actual person that they should have brought in or targeted this free agency. I know they were in on Juju Smith-Schuster, and he said, no, thanks, I'm going to stay in Pittsburgh. So maybe this was kind of like let's take him instead since we're not able to get the guy we were going after. The Chiefs were able to bring in defensive tackle Jaron Reed. They got him on a 1-year, $7 million deal. The Buccaneers, now impressive offseason for the Buccaneers. They were able to pull in every single free agent they had that was a starter. The entire 22-man roster is back next year for the Buccaneers. props to them for being able to move the money around and get that whole thing sorted out. They brought Fournette back on a 1-year, $4 million deal. The entire championship team is there. I'm very excited to see how this works out because that offense got really good on the back half of the year. The defense really came together towards the end of the season as well. Another year of just everyone working together. It's the entire same system, all back. Vita Vea is going to be in. He came back late in the season for the playoff run. So now you're going to get to see this entire team, an entire year of gelling underneath them, and now they're going to really be able to fire on all cylinders. Whether they have an actual offseason program is kind of up in the air. The NFL and the NFLPA are going to have to get into a conversation about that because the NFLPA sounds like they want a virtual offseason again while the NFL wants a regular one. But outside of that, they have the whole year with them as a group, and they're only just going to be able to extend that time. That is, the Chiefs and the Bucs these last couple of years. I just punched my mic there. But the Chiefs and the Bucs these last couple of years, keeping their championship teams together, the Chiefs already showed, that works. They got right back to the Super Bowl. They didn't win. A lot of injuries on the offensive line, but they were able to bring themselves right back into that AFC representative spot in the Super Bowl. The Vikings were able to bring on former Cowboys safety Xavier Woods. They signed him on a $2.25 million deal. And then the Washington football team, who is my dark horse to win the NFC East, signed Adam Humphries on a 1-year deal. The money wasn't brought out yet as to what he actually signed for, but very curious to see how that works out in Washington. They now have a pretty solid receiving core. You have Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Adam Humphries can play the slot as long as he's healthy. That's a pretty solid wide receiver core. If they decide to target, tight end in the draft, and, just continue to build on the team they have, bringing in Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback, that's a very solid group. The defense was great last year. They brought in a cornerback as well during free agency. The pieces are really falling in place for the Washington football team. They have a great coach. They have a solid group of player personnel. I'm excited to see what they can do. If they keep Ryan Fitzpatrick in the starting position and don't play musical chairs with the quarterback spot, or whether it ends up being Fitzpatrick or Heineke, if Heineke beats him out, they need to stick with one or the other and just play that quarterback out. Unless Heineke if he wins out the job and starts playing really bad, just throw Fitzpatrick in there and let him run the season's course. Fitzpatrick did really well in Miami last year and had the plug pulled on him for no reason whatsoever other than they just wanted to start Tua in Miami. Whether that hurt the Dolphins or not is up for debate. I think that Ryan Fitzpatrick is a solid starter. This is a good opportunity. Granted, he's 39 to have a legitimate chance to start in the league and show that he can be a starter. He's old per se, but at this point, Brady's 44 now, or he's going into his 44-year-old season. So what is old at the quarterback position anymore? If you can still throw the football and throw it accurately and make some big plays like Fitzpatrick has shown, as long as he can minimize the interceptions, because he'll have games where he has 4 touchdowns and 4 picks. As long as he can minimize the 4 picks and bring up the 4 touchdowns more often, Washington football team's looking like they're in a really good spot. But that's all the free agent signings. We still have more stuff to talk about, though. The NFL draft is coming up. We're actually exactly 1 month away. We are currently looking at the NFL draft beginning on April 29th, 8 p.m. on the NFL Network Eastern Time. So what I'm going to start doing on the show, if you guys didn't watch last week or at the end of the show, I talked about how we're going to be doing some really cool things content-wise. I brought a couple people that are on board now as to being a part of the show more often. You're going to start seeing that content come out within this next week or so. On top of that, I'm pushing out the show to be on podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, those places. I'm really trying to expand the content and also expand the reach of the content itself. So what we're going to start doing on the show, I'm going to pick either 1 or 2 teams depending on how much I feel I have to talk about, and just kind of where they are going into the season, what they need to go after as we head into the draft, and where they should be coming out of the draft going into the season. And the first team I'm going to highlight is the New York Giants, because a lot of conversation has been going on about the Giants so far after their kind of under the radar offseason that they've had so far. So the big question that I have is, are the Giants actually playoff ready? Now, whether you're a Giants fan or you're somebody that's outside looking in, the Giants, they had a pretty solid signing or a free agent signing period. They were able to bring in Kenny Golladay, John Ross, Galladay being the legitimate number one wide receiver that you can have, John Ross bringing you kind of that deep threat, burn the top off the defense kind of guy. They bring in the experience of Kyle Rudolph to hopefully maybe help mold Evan Ingram into a legitimate tight end. While Rudolph isn't necessarily the guy that he was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, he was at a point where he was one of the better tight ends in the league in his prime. So he can bring that experience to somebody like Evan Ingram, who has kind of struggled to find his own in the league. He's very talented and skilled. He hasn't been able to take that next step as a premier tight end like the Giants were hoping he would be when they drafted him. On top of that, on the defensive side, they brought in Adoree Jackson, and they had a few other lesser signings that, I'm not going to get into because I don't feel they're as important for the team. But overall, with all those signings and hopefully Saquon Barkley coming back off of injury and returning to form, they should look, in theory and on paper, very good as a unit. Now, the question is, are they actually going to be? GM John Mara, in an interview, actually just said to New York Post's Ian O'Connor that he said, "I think our roster is good enough to make the playoffs," quote, end quote. I would say it's debatable. It depends on how you're looking at it. I like the signings they made because they addressed a lot of needs. They lost Kevin Zeitler, their offensive guard, to the Ravens in free agency. That kind of hurts them. But at this point, the Giants' needs are kind of, they're very narrowed down. Adoree Jackson should be really good with James Bradbury on the other side. And then as far as the offensive pieces go, in theory, they kind of round out the unit. You have Sterling Shepard. You have, I believe his name's Darius Slayton, the young guy who was popping off just a couple of years ago. And then on top of that, you also have, like I said, John Ross. You bring in Kyle Rudolph to allow Evan Ingram to kind of, spread out a little bit more around the field and maybe line up more in the wide receiver position as opposed to just strictly the tight end spot, and hopefully, show Ingram how to, be a legitimate tight end threat in the NFL. And with Saquon Barkley coming back, as long as everything goes well, the offense looks very good. I like the setup of it. I've been a big fan of John Ross. I just felt he never had a real opportunity in Cincinnati. It sucks that he kind of had to go as Joe Burrow came in. Who knows what they could have done together as a tandem. But, if Daniel Jones can get him the football, can get Galladay the football, Saquon Barkley, if he can, get the ground game moving, this should be a really good team. And all they need to really do is strengthen that offensive line and protect Daniel Jones a little bit better. I have them going offensive line in the draft for their first round pick, whether that ends up being somebody like Rashawn Slater, Christian Darrisaw, Brady Christensen, whoever it may be, they should be going after offensive linemen should they fall to them at number 11. I think that as far as pass rush goes, there's still a couple guys available. Aldon Smith, Justin Houston. Smith had 5 sacks last year. Granted, he just missed the last 4 years of his career due to suspensions, but it seems like he's kind of put himself on the right path, and he's in position to really, he missed 4 years, but his body also missed the beating of 4 years. So if he's in football form and he's just going to kind of get himself back into the swing of things, and last year was kind of just like breaking the rust off and getting himself moving, Smith would be a solid signing there. He brings kind of a veteran mindset. At one point, Aldon Smith was a premier edge rusher, like the guy at the position. So, he has the experience. Bringing him into New York, if they go, defensive line, offensive line in the draft, he would be good to kind of show the young guys, how to be an elite edge rusher, kind of, maybe give him some secrets on his moves, things like that. But they need to address offensive line more so than anything in the draft. I think that with the offensive, I feel like the offensive line overall in this year's draft is pretty strong. You have some really good players that are coming out that look like they're pro ready to go out of the gate if you're drafting them in the first round and getting some of those top tier guys. If they can go after offensive line and figure out how to fill the hole that Zeitler left behind, the Giants could be in a really good place. I like the way they look. I don't necessarily know if I would say they're going to be playoff bound. I would put them somewhere around, and this is assuming we're having the 17-game season next year, I would probably put them at like 8-9, 9-8, maybe 10-7. They could probably squeak out a few wins. It's the offense that needs to really get going. They averaged 17.5 points last year per game. they've got to be able to put up at least like another 7 points per game. They need to be scoring at least one more touchdown a game to be able to compete, because their defense played really well. Their defense, I believe, allowed roughly like 280, I think maybe 285 was the exact number, 286 points on defense. So the defense wasn't really the issue. It was more so the offense just could not get anything going. They could not really move the ball. They weren't, the defense was playing backed up the entire time, and they were still doing pretty well, holding teams down to low scores. It's just the offense couldn't come through and do anything. So with the defense already being pretty solid, if the offense can take that next step, if Daniel Jones can be the quarterback that New York claims to believe he is, and he's shown his flashes. It's just a matter of, can we take those flashes and make it consistent play? The Giants are in a good spot. I could see them being a number 7 seed, maybe a number 6 seed going into the playoffs next year, as long as all the pieces fall together and they're able to fend off an emerging Washington football team and, what a lot of people are presuming is like the Dallas Cowboys, if they're going to, return to form with Dak Prescott coming back and everything. But the Giants do have they have a legitimate, I would say, like, stake to claim as a potential playoff contender in a weak NFC East division, or what we all are looking at as a weak NFC East division. I mean, you could assume that the Eagles more than likely, I'm not going to say aren't, but more than likely aren't going to be a threat, at least going into this season. But the Giants do have a good opportunity to make a push and sneak in there as like a number 6 or 7 seed. So that's kind of how I look at the Giants. They're primed for a really good spot. They need to go offensive lineman in the draft, and, they should be, in theory, pretty good next year, or at least good enough to maybe squeak into the playoffs. And that's my thoughts on the Giants. And like I said, we'll be doing that for each and every team as we go into the draft. We have an entire month. We're literally exactly a month away from the draft at this point. So as we go through, some of the breakdowns will be during the live shows. Some of the other breakdowns will be done off, live stream, and will be more pre-recorded stuff with the other people I plan on bringing on the show. As far as just reminders for you all, pro days are coming up. Again, we're doing pro days literally until pretty much the draft at this point. Tomorrow, Alabama Part 2 and The Ohio State University. Those are like the two big names to watch tomorrow for pro days. Mac Jones is throwing again. The 49ers, they're sending John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan over there to check him out. Justin Fields will be throwing at Ohio State's pro day, obviously. This is going to get real interesting. I'm very curious to see how both players look. Mac Jones already did a good job his first day. I'm excited that he's throwing again because I'm a big combine person. I know a lot of people have been saying recently, it's just players throwing in shorts. Whatever. It's football content. And on top of that, I like to see how these quarterbacks are able to move. I like to watch their mechanics. This is like, there's nothing else going on in the field, so you have a really good opportunity to just focus on that one person in that moment, and it's nice. I like it. Obviously, the scouts believe that there's some worth of it because they're sending people out there every single year to these pro days. They had the combine every year up until this offseason. I'm going to take what the professionals believe is important over what some of these internet people are trying to say about, people throwing in shorts and whatever. It's a legitimate opportunity to kind of get a good idea on how athletic these players are and just kind of take a good look at their mechanics and skill sets going into the draft. I don't see the problem with it, and I don't understand why, some people think it's a waste of time. Any opportunity to look at a player before you get them, or potentially bring them in, not just because, you're not guaranteed them, but any opportunity to look at a player before you have the potential of pulling them into your team is a plus. Whether it's in shorts or in full pads or not, whatever, either or, it's a good opportunity to get a good look at a good player in person as opposed to just on a TV screen, which a lot of scouts weren't even able to go see these players play in a live action. So this is like a very, very important year for pro days if you really want to look at it. Beyond that, one last little thing to talk to you guys about, the FCF, the Fan Controlled Football League. They have a little bit of news from them. First things first, Sarab Faruti has tweeted out, he is a co-owner and founder of the FCF, that there are plans to add 2 more teams for the season 2.0. So for those of you that do not know, we talked about this last week. The FCF, in like a tweet in a low-key manner, kind of announced that they're going to be having another season, and they're hoping to have it, or planning to have it rather, not hoping, planning to have it within this next year or within this year. So there's supposed to be another season before the end of this year in 2021. I'm excited for that. I'm really excited to see that they plan on adding 2 more teams. The 4-team format, it's fine, but I want to see this whole system expand and grow. They did an awesome job this year with everything that they did. Apparently they also have a league goal of about 20 teams in the next 5 years. The growth for this should be good. It's so interactive. It's so different. It's very entertaining, football to watch. It's not the NFL, but it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be something that's different and more interesting, more interactive, and for the fans. They showed promise with the audience growing through the season. They started with about 730,000 people week 1. By the time week 3 was rolling around, they were at about 900,000 people. And then going in towards the end of the year, they were crossing a 2 million mark in viewership. That's fantastic. That is fantastic. Hopefully that they open up to a more wide audience. They were streaming on Twitch for their live streams or on the app. I hope that they move to like YouTube, Twitch, and any other kind of video services that are out there that would bring them in. I don't know if they have an actual deal with Twitch, but if they're able to, put that up in other areas as well, or maybe even if this starts to really take off and it gets to a point where maybe they could air a potential, or get like a potential TV deal somewhere, it's live broadcast, and TV networks are looking for that. They're prioritizing live broadcast. So if they can slam a deal like that down, maybe not for season 2, but season 3 or 4 going forward, I'd be very excited to see that. I love the FCF. We talk about them here. I try to talk about here at least once a week. So excited to hear that they're expanding. They have goals to expand on top of the expansion that they're looking at for next season. And on top of that, the growth is there. The audience is there. More football is more football. It's good. It's good enough for me. But outside of that, that's pretty much everything I got for you guys today. That's all the news I was able to kind of pull together that I thought was worth sharing with you all. As always, if you're a fan of the show, you enjoy what you're watching, be sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram is up there. All the links to those are down in the description below. On top of that, as I mentioned earlier, the show is now available on major podcasting platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all those places, Podcast Addict, Stitcher, TuneIn. I'm on so many different platforms now. You can pretty much catch us anywhere at this point. So be sure to check us out on all our social medias. If you're a listener and you don't really care to view anything, check us out on those platforms there. Give us a follow. Feel free to comment and talk to me on those social media platforms. I'm very active on everything at this point. I'm really starting to kind of, push myself into being a more social media type person. I'm not a big social media guy, but I'm trying to turn myself into one for the sake of being able to reach out to you guys and be more involved in that internet landscape there. One more time, though, before we go, just running back the question of the day. Who do you think the Jets are taking at number 2, and where do the 49ers go at number 3? The big trade, obviously, it seems like Zach Wilson's the number 2 pick for the Jets, but there's a good possibility maybe they go somewhere else. Maybe they surprise everyone and go Justin Fields. But if it ends up being Zach Wilson, do you think the 49ers should go after Justin Fields? Should they go after Mac Jones? They're sending their head coach and GM out over to the, Alabama Part 2 Pro Day. So that may or may not speak a lot about where they're looking to go, but I am very excited to see how that all turns out for them. As always, I am your host, Ethan Hristodoulou. Thank you all for watching, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Monday, and we'll catch you all again, same time, same place, live on YouTube, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a good one.